So I think I had been there like for 2 weeks. They've been doing worship and I'm just like sitting there like, you know, didn't want to be there. And then they played this song, Come As You Are. And I fell to my knees, bawling, crying. And I'm like, okay, God, I don't know how to do this anymore. So I'm coming as I am.
Let's be honest about recovery.
The rewards, the challenges.
Let's talk about our failures.
We are flawed people, after all.
Let's challenge the stigmas that weigh us down.
Because while most of us are looked at,
Few of us are seen.
Let's talk about addiction.
And how Christ overcomes our weaknesses.
Because we are loved.
because we are
We
loved.
are
Because
loved.
we are loved.
We are loved.
We are
Because
loved.
we are loved. Hi, my name is Lauren, and this is my story. I grew up in the Brownsville revival in Pensacola. I got saved at the age of 4. By 18, I started partying. My life slowly spiraled out of control. It started with small compromises that eventually led me to places and situations I never dreamed I would be in. My life was completely consumed by drugs. There was no price too high, no person I wasn't willing to hurt, no relationship I wasn't willing to throw away. I had been to several rehabs and nothing was working. I finally came to the Home of Grace in June of 2023. Something changed in me one day and I fell to my knees and cried out to God. And He saved me right where I was at. I'm so thankful for everything He has done in my life, and I can't wait to see what His plans are for my future.
Hey there, and welcome back to the Jesus Loves Addicts podcast. I'm Kathryn. This is my co-host, Paul. Today, we're going to be talking with Lauren Rector. Lauren is a single mother from Pensacola who really didn't get introduced to drugs until she was 18. And very quickly, her life spiraled out of control. And today, she's going to tell us how she came to be here.
Hi.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So we're basically just going to let you jump into your story, and Paul and I will both interrupt, ask questions.
Okay.
All right.
Like, where do I start from?
The beginning.
All right. So, I grew up with both of my parents in addiction. My dad has been an alcoholic pretty much my whole life.
Okay.
My mom struggled with drugs and alcohol. They got divorced when I was 3. My mom went to a faith-based rehab when I was 4.5, and she got saved, and she's been sober since then.
Okay.
But with them being divorced, it was kind of like half the time I was in church with my mom, the other half I had to act a certain way around my dad. So pretty much my whole childhood growing up, I had to be 2 different people. So it was confusing to me. So
can I pause you there?
Yeah.
See, this is what we'll do. So right away, I'm curious. So your mom is saved. You're acting I suppose you mean you're acting the church person with her. What was the persona with your dad? How was that different?
So my dad was pretty much, he was an alcoholic. So a lot of chaos. I feel like I did things to get his approval. Like, he was real big into rock and roll, partying and stuff. Like, I think the first time I drank, I was like 12 with my aunt on my dad's side of the family. And then with my mom, I had to act like the perfect church girl. Like, I didn't have anything wrong with me,
Yeah.
So that was difficult. And I didn't really realize that's what I was doing until I got older.
When you drank at 12, just building, you said you kind of had to please. Was that kind of a, hey, Dad, look what I can do kind of thing? Is that
maybe?
That?
Yeah. I think I just wanted to like fit in with my family.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was he there when you were drinking?
I think he was there, but he didn't know until after, from what I remember. And he wasn't mad about it. He was just like, okay.
That's what I was fixing to say. Was there any consequences?
Mm-mm. No.
Did you have siblings?
I have 2 stepbrothers.
Okay.
They're younger than me.
So it was really just you in this. Okay.
Yeah.
So they were not in the household while you were?
Well, they were. I don't think they were there that night. I want to say my dad got together with my first stepmom when I was like 5 or 6. And then they divorced whenever I was in college. So, I mean, I consider them my brothers.
Okay. So mom gets saved. She's on the path to recovery. You're splitting your time. I'll let you jump back in. I derailed you there. Sorry.
So I went to a Christian school my whole life. I wasn't allowed to go to public school. I made straight A's. I graduated when I was 16, never partied, never went to a club. And I think like once I turned 18, so I started college when I was 17. And a lot of the people there were already going out to the clubs and stuff. And I'm like, I wonder what I'm missing.
Yeah.
So I think I was 18 the first time I went to a club. And then it kind of just started like drinking on the weekends with my friends, hiding it from my mom. Then it kind of turned into, I think maybe when I was 19, I started drinking more. And then that was the first time I smoked weed. My dad actually gave it to me. But I didn't feel like pressured to do it.
Did your mom ever have any inkling that you were drinking?
She had no idea.
No clue.
No clue.
Okay.
So then around like 19 or 20 is when I started, drinking more heavily. I got introduced to Molly, which is ecstasy, and cocaine. And I very quickly formed a habit with that, like doing it every day. My mom still didn't know. She kind of knew something was going on.
Yeah.
Because I didn't live in the house at that point. I had my own apartment. And she would come in town because she lived in Nashville then. She would come in town to see me and I would always make excuses like, well, I'm busy or I'm working or, whatever.
Were you still in school?
I think I had stopped going to college at that point. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's around the same time my dad got divorced from my first stepmom. And he took that pretty hard. I actually stopped going to college because it was like he would be so drunk all the time, like blackout drunk. Like he wouldn't even eat. He wouldn't go to the store and buy things for himself. So I started doing all that. I started taking care of the house and all that stuff. And I don't want to say I dropped out because of him. It just was like, oh, I need to take care of him. He never asked me to.
So you were doing well in school. It wasn't that you were missing classes because you were partying and stuff. You felt the pull to take care of Dad, even though he didn't ask. I get that.
He would never do that.
That was, okay. All right. And so you stepped out. So right away, we get kind of a flavor of both. Correct me if I'm wrong. So you're talking about this motion towards addiction, but there's also, would it be fair to say, kind of a codependent side of this too? Were you always a caretaker, always the one who kept, okay.
Yeah. I'm like, my dad's not okay. What can I do to fix him? What can I do to solve this?
Were you like that only with him, or did you find yourself like that with your mom too?
I don't think I was like that with my mom.
Just him.
Just my dad, pretty much. I didn't even realize that until just now.
It sometimes works like that. It's like, oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then my dad moved away. I think I was probably 21 whenever he moved to like near Tampa, Florida.
Okay.
So, and my mom was living in Nashville.
You were the only one in Pensacola?
Yeah. Well, my brothers still live there. And of course I had friends, and then my aunt lives there.
Okay.
So it kind of got to the point where I didn't have anyone like to check on me,
Yeah.
I mean, of course they would call and see if I was okay, but I had freedom. And I pretty much just spent every single day partying. And then I started bartending, which that made things worse. I started getting into pills, like Lortabs, Percocet, Xanax, Adderall. I needed to be up, down, sideways, anything. I literally every single day. And I didn't even realize I had a problem. I was like, well, these are prescription drugs. I'm not a drug addict.
Were you getting them by way of a doctor, or were you buying them from
Sometimes, but mostly I would just buy them from people.
Okay.
Yeah. And I would make good money bartending, but it would all be spent on drugs. Like so much pointless things in my life.
How were you able to pay your rent, your bills? Okay.
Yeah. I think my dad was helping me with my rent. So really, I just had money and an addiction.
Yeah.
And then so bartending, then I started working at a strip club bartending there. And it was a really toxic environment.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I remember when I first started working there, I'm like, I'll never dance. I can't do that.
Yeah.
And working there for about a year or two, I think I got fired for being late or something, fired from bartending. And I'm like, well, I'll show them, I'll dance and make more money. So yeah. And I remember I would drink like a bottle of whatever before I went to work. I don't even remember half the nights I worked, like completely blackout.
So that was and again, I make these statements that are really questions, right?
Yeah.
But the way you're describing that, having to drink a bottle too, that was a very shame-based time in your life. Is that fair to say? Was it? I mean, it doesn't sound like you went into that like this was my game plan. It sounds
definitely
like
not. No.
That's exactly what I was thinking when you said I had to drink a bottle, because it really went against everything.
Yeah, everything I was raised in. I remember a guy came in one night whenever I was working, and he was asking me if I knew Jesus. And I'm like, this is a weird question for a customer at a strip club to ask me. And I'm like, well, yeah, I grew up in church.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't pray like I should. I don't go to church anymore. In my mind, I was still a Christian. Like, even though I didn't have a relationship with God, it was just something that was like so ingrained in me. I just thought like, oh, I'm still good. And that really made me question things, but not enough to change.
Well, you didn't have enough consequences yet.
Yeah, definitely not.
I don't think it's by accident, though, that a customer in a strip club asks you about Jesus. I just want to say that.
Yeah.
It's like a little reminder.
Mm-hmm.
So where does it go from here, right? So here you are drinking your shame away to do your nightly work and then...
And then I remember in the middle of that, I started doing oxys, like what are Roxy, whatever, like the 30 milligram, whatever. So I got addicted to that. And that was a very expensive habit. I remember going like through withdrawals while I was trying to work, and I was like blowing up everyone I knew, like, hey, please bring me this. I'll give you $100. I'll do whatever. And I was like, what? Why am I even doing this? I'm spending all the money I'm making. I'm covered in bruises. I'm not happy. And then I got to where I was self-harming. I would go home at night and just slice my arm open. And because I didn't want to feel the emotional pain anymore. I'd rather feel physical pain than emotional.
Well, and the physical was something you could control.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's interesting because I've talked to people who self-harm before, and they would say, so that's insightful. Thank you. So they would describe it as a way to feel something, but you were using it as a distraction to not feel.
Yeah.
Which, is it fair to say that's kind of what all of this was in your life right now? You were using the substances, now the cutting, all of this was to not feel what was happening. Okay.
Yeah. And then in the middle of that, I found out I was pregnant, and I didn't want to stop doing drugs. I didn't want to stop cutting myself. I didn't want to stop working. And I ended up having a miscarriage at like 8 weeks, I think. And I felt a lot of guilt from that. Like it was my fault that I lost the baby. And the guy I was with at that time blamed me too. Like I remember he got back in town from working offshore, and he beat me and would not let me leave his house until I told him that it was my fault and I loved him and it was going to be okay. And I just remember feeling like trapped. And I already felt like it was my fault, you know?
Yeah.
And he just reinforced it.
Yeah.
Was he using with you?
I think he did like cocaine and stuff. And he drank a lot, but he was never on like the pain pills and stuff like that.
That you were on.
Okay.
Where was family during all this time?
My dad was still living in Tampa. My mom was living in Pensacola. She had moved back at that point. I was still living with her. I think I'd moved back in with her.
You were living with her during... No, so now I'm assuming she knows.
She didn't know that I was dancing. She knew I bartended at a strip club, and she did not like that. One day I opened up to her and I told her I had been cutting myself, and she didn't know what to do about that. She was just like, so worried. She's like, well, Lauren, why are you doing that? I'm like, I don't know. I'm just so hurt inside. And I told her I was pregnant. She wasn't really happy about that. I mean, she was happy for me, but not happy with the circumstances. And then I told her that I had the miscarriage. She brought me to the emergency room and everything. She was with me for all of that.
Do you feel like when you were telling her those things that was your first like crying out for help? Like, I need you to see me. I need help.
Yeah, I remember because whenever I would dance, I would have bruises all over my legs. And I would wear like either pants or if I wore shorts, I would wear socks up to here so you couldn't see. And I always wear like long sleeve shirts in the summertime. Like, and we're in Florida. It is hot.
Yeah.
So I don't know if maybe she just didn't want to know or maybe I just hit it well. I don't know.
Maybe a little of both.
I'd like to take a moment to recognize a major podcast sponsor. Today's episode is brought to you by America's Thrift Stores, your go-to option for decluttering and giving back. You have a closet bursting at the seams or a garage that's seen better days? We've got the perfect solution for you.
That's right. America's Thrift Stores makes it easy to clear out the clutter and make a positive impact in your community. Whether you are cleaning out your wardrobe, downsizing your living space, or just looking to give back, America's Thrift Stores has you covered.
And here's the best part. You've got options. Schedule a hassle-free home pickup, drop off your items at one of their convenient donation sites, or swing by an America's Thrift Store to donate in person. No matter which way you choose, you're making a difference.
Every donation you make to America's Thrift Stores directly benefits charities in your area, such as the Home of Grace and other fantastic organizations dedicated to helping those in need.
For example, donations made to America's Thrift Stores in southern Mississippi help the Home of Grace provide support and assistance to individuals facing drug and alcohol addiction. Your contributions make a real impact on their mission to provide freedom from addiction through Christ-centered recovery. So, not only are you decluttering your life, but you're also helping build a stronger and more supportive community.
It's truly a double blessing. So what are you waiting for? Clean out that closet, clear out that garage, and make a positive difference in your community by donating to America's Thrift Stores.
Visit America's Thrift Stores online to schedule a home pickup, locate a donation site near you, or get directions to one of their store locations.
America's Thrift Stores, where giving back never goes out of style.
You mentioned that your mom got sober. What was her drugs of choice? Was it just alcohol, or was she also like using opiates? And
I think she used a lot of things.
Okay,
yeah, I know like cocaine.
Talked about it.
Opiates. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, not like in depth. She doesn't like talking about it. I don't think that much, but pretty much the same things I struggled with.
Well, the reason I asked that, because it was just interesting when you said, I think you said something to the effect of maybe she didn't want to see it, or that's maybe how I heard it, because that's kind of the thought in my head. If she was using the same thing and she sees her daughter going through that and she remembers her pain, we have a weird way of protecting our own psyches, right? Even if it's hurting those around us. And so, yeah, it's interesting. Maybe she just didn't want to see that. I'm curious though, given her own history, was there ever a moment, because it sounds like you're giving her little tidbits, right?
Yeah.
Right. It's, was there ever a moment that she said, okay, what's going on here?
Well, I think she found out that I was taking the Oxy. But I convinced her it was from my back pain. I had been in a car wreck. And she wasn't okay with it, but at the same time, it wasn't like, you need help, Lauren. She was just kind of like, okay, well, that's what you're doing. It's a prescription pill. Like it wasn't.
Were you getting any of that prescribed? Did she think you were getting that prescribed?
She knew that I would buy them from people.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Was the wreck caused from using?
No.
Okay.
And then I think shortly after all that, my whole family had an intervention for me. And this is whenever I was like using the oxy heavily. And I remember being very upset. And I was like telling everybody about themselves, like, I don't need help. What are you talking about? And so I agreed to go to rehab. I think this was 2021.
How old are you at this time?
How old am I now?
I do the same thing.
Let's
You're 30.
see. I'm 33 now.
Yeah.
I just turned 33. So 30, right?
We'll
2021.
go with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My math isn't mathing.
Yeah.
Mine either. I was like, no. So your first treatment, 2021, you were about 29, 30.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I did the program. I did 30 days. I came back home. I think I had been back home for like 2 weeks, if that. And they did like a maintenance program. So I was on Suboxone. So I wouldn't say I was sober, but I was trying. I really did try there. And literally had been home 2 weeks, and I got into another car wreck. Someone hit me going like 100 miles an hour from behind on the interstate. And I broke 2 vertebrae in my back. My car like flipped, spun, went to the median of the interstate.
Wow.
I remember my car finally stopped, and I went to move my legs from underneath, like where the steering wheel and the dashboard was. I couldn't feel anything from my hips down at all. And in that moment, I just cried out to God. I prayed, and I hadn't prayed in years. I was like, God, please don't let me be paralyzed. Please, 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 like screaming, begging. And the second I got done praying, I could feel everything again.
Wow.
Yeah. Unfortunately, because I broke 2 vertebrae, they gave me fentanyl in the ambulance. And that's kind of where my addiction to heroin and fentanyl came into play, was after I broke my vertebrae.
Did you start shooting it?
No.
You never shot it, just always. Okay. You know, Lauren, it's interesting. As I hear your story, I'm really curious about, and maybe you were detached from it. I don't know, but there's such a Jekyll and Hyde thing going on for you this whole time, right? I mean, and maybe that's true for a lot of addicts, but you know, you're raised in this home, you're trying to live 2 different lives with 2 different parental presentations. I mean, my gosh, you know, it's exhausting to hear. I mean, what was that like? I mean, did you feel like you were on stage all the time? I mean, what was?
To me, I didn't know any different. So it was just normal for me.
Like
I knew how I need to
this
act in front of who I was around, and I did it.
without thinking about it.
Yeah.
Really.
No, I never thought about it.
So it is playing a role though.
Yeah.
This is who I am today. This is who I'm going to be around this many people. I'm this.
And I always knew how to act in front of whoever. Like I knew if I needed to act like I had it all together, I could do that.
Yeah.
If I could be myself.
Maybe too well.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Now that you say that,
Nobody
that's probably
sees the
why nobody could tell I was like really struggling that bad.
Right.
Until later.
And maybe why even when you were asking for help in the only way that you could, they didn't really see it.
Yeah.
Because you had been okay for so long. It's kind of hard. We may think something's wrong, but it's really hard to reconcile that with someone crying out for help when they have always been able to pull it together. It's,
you
know?
And so a little bit of a heartbreaking twist here, right? You go to treatment, come out, and to use your words, I really tried there.
Yeah.
Come out, at least there was a change of mind, right?
Yeah.
You're on Suboxone. We won't go into all that, but you're trying. And so there was at least a change of mind. Boom, car accident, fentanyl, off to the races.
Yeah. I was like, why am I even going to bother trying again if this is what happens to me? There's no point. So I just pretty much gave up on trying to be sober. And I went to a couple different rehabs after that. I had a second intervention. In 2022, I went to 3 different rehabs in the same month. The first one I got kicked out of in a week. The second one I left in less than 24 hours. The third one I completed 30 days, went home and bought fentanyl. Like I was just going to please my parents. I didn't want to be sober.
So there was no trying in those.
No.
Okay.
Did not try.
Did you ever just flat out tell them, I don't care?
I mean, basically, like I remember calling my dad whenever I had AMA left against medical advice in less than 24 hours from the second rehab in 2022. And I was like, Dad, I just couldn't stay here. I just want fentanyl.
What was his response? Because he's still in his active addiction?
He was sober at that point, I think. He's been sober for a couple years now.
Oh, great.
Yeah, he's doing really good.
Good. So what was his response when you tell him that?
Just try to be like loving and supportive, but also like I don't understand. Like you have your son at home. I completely left out my child. Whoops.
It happens. You can back up some.
So in 2018, I got pregnant with my son Major. And after having like the miscarriage, I was like, okay, I'm going to be sober this whole time. So I quit everything cold turkey. And this was before I had done heroin and fentanyl. So I was just mostly on Roxy's and Xanax, Adderall, and drinking like a liter a day. So I find out I'm pregnant. I quit everything cold turkey. My whole pregnancy, I'm doing great. I have to have an emergency C-section, get put back on pain pills, get back on Roxy's after I had him.
So when you think about that, though, when you mentioned after that wreck, it's like, this is what happens when I'm trying. I get prescribed pain meds. I sober up previously to do the right thing, to have this baby and make it to the end and back to pain pills. So that's almost like this is what happens every time I try.
Yeah. And that's what I thought for so long. Like, even if I do try, it's not going to matter. It's not going to work. Something's going to happen.
So why keep trying?
Exactly.
And yet something happens. What happens? Where's the aha moment for you coming?
So it took me getting arrested twice last year and having to deal with consequences. I got arrested for shoplifting, 2 counts of larceny, 2 counts of possession of fentanyl, and then smuggling in contraband to the jail. Because in my mind, I'm like, I can't be sick in here. I'm just going to sneak it in. I didn't care about the consequences. All I cared about was not getting sick and getting my next fix. Literally all I cared about. I hadn't even seen my son in like 6 months at that point.
Who had him?
My mom.
Okay.
I left my house December 2022, turned my phone off for like 3 months, just completely off. My parents didn't know if I was alive or dead. No one knew. I was just living in hotels with whoever had fentanyl, meth, whatever. I literally was like, I'm just going to die an addict. What's the point? I remember when I finally did talk to my dad, I want to say it was right before I got arrested, which was in May of last year. He was asking me if I would sign over my rights for Major, my son, to my brother and his wife. And I'm like, I thought about it. I'm like, well, I don't deserve to be a mom. So yeah. Who am I to have this great kid and I'm not even there for him? He hasn't talked to me. Like no one knows if I'm alive or dead. I'm putting all these things above my child, above myself, above everything I cared about. So that's kind of where I was mentally right before I got arrested in May.
Still some emotion about that for you. Yeah.
My mom wouldn't bail me out of jail until I think I'd been there 11 days. The worst withdrawals I've ever had in my life.
Was this the first time you'd had legal consequences?
Yeah.
Okay.
I got arrested in March and then in May.
Okay.
So I was already out on bail when I got arrested in May again. I lost 15 pounds in 11 days when I was in jail. And I remember looking at myself and not even recognizing myself. and my mom took me. She finally bailed me out. I'm like, take me wherever you want me to go. Just please get me out of here. Like, I was not okay. And she was talking about going to Teen Challenge for a year. I'm like, whatever, I'll do it. I don't care.
What was happening with so I know we do, and I don't want to keep cutting you off but you had mentioned self-harm, cutting and all that stuff. Was all of that still happening? Were you still?
So I stopped when I got pregnant with Major.
Okay. So how long was that period of your life? Just because it's
like a year or two.
Like a year or two. Okay. And never gone back to it. Mm-mm. Okay, great. All right.
Yeah.
Because that too is not uncommon. So I'm sorry. So she's Teen Challenge, maybe for a year, whatever, you're at this point. So what happens?
So I still don't want to be sober. I just want to get out of jail. Because in March, when she bailed me out, she was waiting for me outside and I turned my phone off and left with someone I was in jail with. Because I didn't want to go. She wanted me to go to rehab then, and I didn't want to go. I still, even though I had legal consequences, still didn't want to go. So the second time when she bailed me out in May, she was like, if you don't go to get help, I'm revoking your bond. You're going back to jail. So I pretty much was forced to get sober in a sense. I mean, I had already gone through withdrawals, but I was still like...
You wanted to use.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think at that point, you're aware that you have legal consequences, but what does that really matter?
Yeah.
Because you don't really care.
I literally, in my eyes, I don't have a future.
Right.
So why does that matter?
Yeah.
Yeah. So she bailed me out and she took me to detox for 4 days. And she brought me to the Home of Grace.
And when was that?
June 8th of 2023 is when I got there.
Okay.
Still didn't want to be there. Very angry. I think I got there on a Thursday and we went to church on that Sunday. And you literally couldn't have paid me to go to church. I actually had someone pay me to come to their church and I did not go. Like right before I got arrested. So we went to the church and I smoked in the bathroom. Did not care. I was like, let them kick me out. I don't care.
Yeah.
At least I didn't leave. That was my mindset.
Wouldn't have been your fault.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Still kind of thumbing your nose at everybody.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I was very angry for a while.
Yeah. Where do you think that anger was coming from?
That's what I was going to.
I don't know. I think I had just become so hardened in my heart not to care about anything. And I was just angry. Instead of caring for people, I was just angry with everyone and myself and life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you mentioned with yourself. I think oftentimes when we're consumed with anger, a big chunk of it is at ourselves. And to be that hardened, I think anger is a great tool, right? So it's interesting. Like you said, I don't really know what I was angry at. But when we push everybody away, I think, look, this is just me, right? My 2 cents would be, I think inside all of us, there is a spark to want to connect.
Yeah.
Right. But in that lifestyle that you're leading where you need everybody at arm's length, the best way to make that happen is to be angry at everybody because nobody wants to be around that. Right.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it is almost like a behavior that gets adopted just to protect your isolation. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also didn't feel like I was worthy of anything in life. Like I had like given up my morals for anything. Like I remember I was living with my dealer and, you know, basically exchanging sex for drugs.
Yeah.
And I didn't have any emotion about that. I did not care. Didn't care about anything. Obviously, I hadn't seen my son in 6 months.
Yeah.
I would think about him sometimes, but it was like there was just no emotion there. Like all the life had been sucked out of me.
Yeah.
I never smiled. I would argue with anybody. I just didn't care about anyone. I didn't even care about myself.
Were you, obviously this comes to mind, were you suicidal?
No, I was just, I just thought that I was always going to be an addict. There was no help and I'd probably die in addiction. I had never overdosed, so I felt like I was invincible. I'm not going to overdose.
It can't happen to me.
Yeah. even though I had friends that overdosed and died. It's not
So
gonna
just
happen to me.
joyless and flat at this point, right? Just, this is my existence. I'm okay.
Yeah.
That's very sad, right? To me. Yeah. But it's also really common and makes me really want to hear where your turnaround happens, right? Because that's a very dark place to be, right?
Yeah.
There is something called parasuicidal, which just means you don't care if you live or die.
Yeah, that's
pretty
much.
Yeah.
That's what it was. You
Yeah.
just didn't care.
Yeah. I
At
didn't
some
care.
point, you expected it and you didn't really care.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I wonder if that's part of the reason you couldn't feel emotion or wouldn't allow yourself to feel emotion
Probably.
when you thought of Major,
Yeah.
because you needed to hold on to that.
Mhm.
And if I think about him, then I'm going to care.
Yeah.
And I really don't want to care,
hmm
because then that's going to make us look at everything that's gone on.
Yeah.
Before we go any further, let's take a minute to address the man or the woman listening to today's episode and wishing for a better life. Or maybe addiction has completely overtaken a family member or a friend.
You are not alone. As you may know, the Jesus Loves Addicts podcast is produced by the Home of Grace, a Christ-centered addiction recovery program in South Mississippi with over 60 years of experience.
The Home of Grace has residential programs ranging from 30 days to 12 months. With 2 separate campuses for men and women, they are fully staffed with caring individuals who want nothing more than to guide you to a life of recovery.
Services include individual and group counseling, marriage and family counseling, classes, workshops, GED, and workforce training, all grounded in biblical principles.
And because of donations from the community, the cost of the program is incredibly affordable.
Thousands of alumni from all across the country can tell you there is no other program in the world quite like the Home of Grace.
If you want to start a new path to recovery, don't wait. Speak with their admissions specialist today. Visit homeofgrace.org or call 833-55-GRACE to talk with someone.
That's 833-55-GRACE. Call the Home of Grace today. Your story is, as they all are, but kind of uniquely heartbreaking in the way you describe kind of, we say that addiction ultimately ends in death. The physical death is sometimes almost, and listen, I probably shouldn't say this because I don't know how people are going to hear this. So I don't mean this literally, but you could almost argue that the physical death is almost a relief for somebody at some point, because you were kind of dead here, but still alive, right?
Yeah.
And really a sad kind of place to be. So you come into this last treatment. Sounds like kind of kicking and screaming.
Yes, definitely.
All right, screw everybody. I'll show you whatever.
Yes.
Smoke in the church. Let's see what I can do.
Mm-hmm.
And you really didn't. You had an aversion to church after being raised in it.
Yeah.
But it sounds like that developed over time, right? It's almost like as you built, and again, please don't let me put words in your mouth. I don't know how it's just, I'm just kind of hearing this story, but it feels like as you built almost this self-hatred, it became a hatred for everything around you as well. Is that, and feel free to, no, Paul, you're way off.
I don't know. I wouldn't say I hated everyone or everything.
What about you?
I don't know if I hated myself. I just didn't like who I had become.
Yeah.
But I didn't care enough to do anything about it.
Yeah. Okay.
Just numb.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear that. Okay. So here we are, treatment, kicking and screaming.
Mm-hmm.
Where do we go from here?
So I think I had been there for 2 weeks, and we had a thing called lay renewal where these people from churches come in and they do a whole weekend service thing. And they've been doing worship, and I'm just sitting there didn't want to be there. And then they played this song, Come As You Are. And I fell to my knees, bawling, crying. And I'm like, okay, God, I don't know how to do this anymore. So I'm coming as I am, Okay.
Amen. Oh, wow. That's great.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? Right? You have, this wall a mile thick.
Mm-hmm.
but he knows, right? With the softest of darts, he pierced that armor with a song.
I hadn't cried in
song.
so long either. Like the song ended and I was still just weeping, bawling. And everyone's like, is she okay?
Is it easier to let yourself do that now?
Yeah, I just don't want to mess up my makeup.
Understandable.
That's great. But in a real sense, though, do you find, because I mean, I'm sure those moments were few and far between when you're living angrily for all the reasons we talked about. So now do you find it easier to reach those moments if you need to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember after that, I realized like how hard my heart was towards everything. Like I would want to cry and I couldn't cry.
Yeah.
So I started praying the same thing every day. Take away this heart of stone, give me a heart of flesh. And I mean, it worked. Like God answered every single prayer that I ever said whenever I was there.
You didn't mess your makeup up.
Okay.
I promise.
And I didn't even think I was going to graduate, to be honest. I did graduate the program, and then I stayed an extra 6 months because I was so committed to the process. I'm like, I don't think God's done with me yet. I need to stay longer and figure out what all needs to be worked on before I go back to the world, because this is my last treatment center. I'm not doing this again.
Wow. You think he's done with you now?
No.
Yeah. It'd be nice, right? If we just got that finished stamp on us, but no, not yet. Wow. So, oh God, I love that story. I mean, again, something that just strikes me about the ability to get through that hardness with a song. I don't know. That just really blows me away. So I love that.
And I think I sing and I play guitar. So music is really important to me.
Oh.
I think that's kind of why the song struck me. So
he reached you the way he knew he could.
Yep.
And even in your hardened heart, you were going to hear him. And if we're feeling unworthy, we need to hear come as you are. I mean, you don't have to change anything. You don't have to be one way in front of one parent, another in front of the other.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. He just accepts all of it.
Yeah.
He just wants us.
Yeah.
So I have to ask, I'm glad you mentioned that I was cued to the fact that you sang, and any chance we get a stanza off of that life-changing song that hit you? Are you willing to give us?
Oh, gosh, no.
You don't have to. No. All right. Fair enough. I'll wait to see that another day. But let me ask you a question. What are your relationships like with your parents now? I mean, that was, rocky road.
Yeah. They're a lot better than they were. A lot better. My dad was like, I can finally sleep at night. I don't have to worry about you dying.
Yeah.
I remember he would text me and be like, are you alive? Are you okay? It was to that point.
Yeah.
I think everyone's a lot better. And I'm a lot better. It's easier for me to talk to them and tell them how I'm feeling. My relationship with my mom isn't perfect, but it's way better than it was.
Yeah.
It's a work in progress.
Yeah.
Yeah. Famous or notable slogan in the 12 steps, progress, not perfection.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
So that's a lofty goal. So that's great. What about with your son?
So I get to see him way more often now. My mom told him that I was going to the doctor to get better whenever I was in rehab. So he would come visit. Once I got to, I think 6 months of being in the program, I got to see him every weekend. So he would come visit for a few hours, and it was like we hadn't missed a beat. Everything's great.
Yeah. How old is he?
He's 5.
5. Neat. Great age.
Yeah.
Wow. So now you are doing, what does your life look like in recovery? Because we already covered the fact that he's not done with us, right? Recovery doesn't, we're not perfect. What does your life look like now in general?
Well, I just got my year chip from Celebrate Recovery.
That's awesome.
Which I never thought that would happen. I literally couldn't stay sober longer than 30 days.
When not in a program.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got a job at Home of Grace. And that's a really big part of my recovery is being able to help other ladies that come in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How important, I know these, but how important is that to your recovery? Giving back and helping?
It's everything.
Yeah.
I feel like if I'm not helping other people, what am I doing?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Well, you shared something with me about you taught a class yesterday.
Yeah. So I
Tell me
taught
about
the
that.
relapse prevention class yesterday because the
Teacher.
I can't even talk.
The instructor.
The instructor, that's the word I was looking for. The instructor was out of town. So she asked me to teach it. And I was literally on the verge of tears the whole time. Not because I was sad, because I felt so much love in my heart for these ladies. And I want so badly for them to get it right.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And it was like, I felt like I found my calling.
I was going to ask you about that because, you know, we're coming from this place where you have given up on life.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
This is it. And so I was going to ask you, you know, if I say the word purpose, right, does that kind of light a light bulb now? I mean, do you feel like that's, because, I mean, when we give up, right, there's purposelessness. Sure. We'll go with that. So, and now, you know, now there's this sense of purpose and giving back. And so, yeah, thank you for that. That is really.
Well, I love that you went from saying my heart was so hardened. I prayed this prayer consistently over and over, you know, remove this heart of stone and give me a heart of flesh. And then just a few minutes later, you say, I was fighting back tears because my heart was so filled with love for them.
Yeah.
If that's not more evidence that he truly brings from death to life.
Yeah.
And you were willing to commit to a process. I also like that and I want to draw attention to that. You said you knew that process wasn't done. You knew that you needed longer, that this was it for you.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you fully committed and stayed longer.
I did. And it was hard. I mean, obviously my son, you know, I didn't get to see him when I wanted to. I didn't get to talk to him every day. But I was like, you know what? If I miss out on a few months with my son, it's better than me not being here for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it's life or death. It literally was at that point.
Right.
So
I'm glad you said that. And I say that because I've heard moms say, no, you don't understand. I can't stay longer. I can't do this. I've got to go back. And if all of us could get to that place of like desperation, willingness to go to any length, like, what does this look like? And play that tape out and say, you know what? Yeah, this might be hard.
Yeah.
But this time will pass. And if I can invest in this time, then I'm stronger and hopefully won't miss years later. Just take the time that's needed. And it may look different for some that may be 30 days, for some that may be 90. It sounds like for you, you needed 9 months.
Yeah.
But good for you.
Thank you.
Yeah. You know, you said something in the intro that we have people do. And I'm curious, in retrospect, you said you were saved at the age of 4. In retrospect, looking at the whole thing, I don't know what the answer is here, right? But would you still say that was your moment of salvation, or is there a different time point in retrospect that you say, you know, I don't know, maybe that was, I don't know.
I feel like, you know, I was so young. I don't know if I actually grasped the concept of everything. I just knew my mom had changed and I wanted what she had. And that was Jesus. And then growing up in church, going to Christian school, it was like, I know I had a relationship with God, but it's definitely nothing like I have now. It was, back then it was like, well, this is what I need to do. I need to do what's right, or I'm going to hell, is kind of what it was like. Now it's like, I want to do what's right because I love God. You know, like, it's just like a change of heart.
Great.
I know.
I love that explanation, right? Because, and there's lots of psychological parallels to nonsense that you just summed up beautifully. That's not nonsense, right? Kind of moving from that place of, And I think this is true for so many people early in faith. We kind of believe because of fear.
Yeah.
Right. I believe because I want to avoid the taught consequence of not believing. Right.
Yeah.
But when you really encounter him, it's no longer about the fear of what happens. It's about, I love this person, Jesus, and I want to be closer and I want that relation. Man, it's just, it really is remarkable, Lauren. And Kathryn just highlighted it too. I mean, again, you coming from this place where, again, in your 30-second testimony, there was another thing you said. You said there was nobody I wouldn't hurt, nobody I wouldn't push away, no relationship I wouldn't end, right? Throw away.
Yeah.
And here you are, on the verge of tears for a group of women you know very little about, other than what you're learning now, because you care so deeply for them. I mean, if that is not a transitioned life by the grace of God, I don't know what is, right? And so, wow. Appreciate that.
You very recently decided what your goal was.
Yeah.
What is that?
So I want to become a counselor and help other women to overcome addiction. Because if he can do it for me, he can do it for anybody. Amen. I know that.
Amen. In that vein, somebody out there watching, struggling, what would you tell them?
It's never too late. And it doesn't matter what you've done. Your past does not define you.
Yeah.
Literally, all you have to do is ask for help and he will help you. He'll give you strength where you're weak. He will love you unconditionally. You are worthy, you are enough, and you are loved.
Well done.
Exclamation point, exclamation point. Wow, that is fantastic. Lauren, thank you so much. Kathryn, did you have...
No.
Yeah.
I'm not following that.
Yeah, I know. You've made some really powerful summaries of your story, and what a great one to close on. Lauren has agreed to grace us with a part of a song that she loves to sing. And so here is Lauren.
Lord, I offer up this rebel heart, so stubborn and so restless from the start. I don't want to fight you anymore. So take this rebel heart and make it yours.
Woo! All right, a tidbit. Guys, I hope you really appreciate the value of that, right? I mean, we just spent time learning about how Lauren lived a life in her addiction of isolation and pushing everybody away. And now here she is in a studio, unquestionably uncomfortable situation to walk into and offering to give that to us, right? Yeah. Week in and week out, we hear these just stories of redemption. And guys, that's really what this podcast is all about, right? We want you to, it's not digging into the horrors of addiction so that we can, see who has the best story. That's ridiculous. It's to show you that there is no spot dark enough that God can't reach you. These are stories of redemption. Nobody is if you have a next breath, you have a next opportunity. And I think if you walk away from anything from hearing these podcasts, I really hope it's that. And again, I want to just point everybody to the website, JesusLovesAddicts.com, because we want to hear your stories. Again, not for any other reason than the hope that this gives people. We're starting to hear comments from people about how they do feel hopeful in seeing these lives turned around. And man, I tell you what, that's motivation enough to keep coming and sitting in this chair, because that's what it's all about. Having said that, I want to thank somebody that is not maybe thanked all the time, and not to take the attention off of Lauren, because we are going to end with that too. But there is a gentleman in here that sits off camera, and I feel like we need to give thanks where thanks is due, because somebody, and thank you, sir, for you wrote in a comment thanking Kathryn and I for doing this. And listen, I appreciate that. And we are honored to do it. the heart of this podcast came from Clay Barton. He is our producer. He spends tireless hours editing these things, and it was truly his response to God putting this idea on his heart. And so thank you, Clay.
Thank you.
Really appreciate that. And so just so that you guys know, there really is a heart behind this that you don't see, and many, many hearts that come and sit right where you are, Lauren, that are just, man, thank you so much for being willing to be so open and share those things, right? I mean, that's not an easy story to tell, but what you just said you wanted to help women. Yeah. I have no doubt that you have just helped many in hearing your story. So thank you so much. And guys, until next week, we'll see. It's on Jesus Loves Addicts. Take care.